Stone Age. When we step back to the dawn of humanity, the Stone Age, we uncover an intriguing truth. For millions of years, the richest person in the world probably owned no gold, no palaces, and no treasures, but simply lived longer than everyone else. This era lasted for more than 3.4 million years, ending around 4000–2000 BCE, and left behind almost no written records. Everything we know today comes from archaeology, from fragments of bones, stone tools, and traces of ancient burials. And through those remnants, we can imagine what wealth might have meant in a world where survival itself was the ultimate currency. In tribal societies, there was no money, no banks, and no concept of investment. Wealth was measured in food, water, and the ability to stay alive. The richest person might have been the best hunter, the one who knew where the sweetest berries grew, or the one whose cave kept out wild beasts and storms. A strong tribe was a tribe that shared skills, food, and faith, where everyone understood that the community's strength was its greatest asset. For the weaker ones, poverty often meant an early death, sometimes caused by nothing more than a failed hunt or a dried-up river. Yet, not all were equal. Archaeological evidence shows that social hierarchy emerged far earlier than we once thought. At the Varna necropolis in modern-day Bulgaria, one of the oldest known burial sites on Earth, archaeologists discovered over 6 kilograms of gold buried with just 3 individuals, each holding metal scepters symbolizing authority. One of them, known as the Varna man, was even buried with a gold phallus, a clear emblem of dominance and power. Far to the north, at Sunhir in Russia, the graves of 2 children contained 10,000 ivory beads, hundreds of fox teeth, and finely carved ivory spears, treasures far surpassing those found in adult burials of the same period. Clearly, even among hunter-gatherers, wealth and privilege existed, not in the form of currency, but in the status and reverence bestowed upon them by their communities. These discoveries reveal something profound. Inequality did not begin with modern civilization. It took root as soon as humans learned to bury and honor their dead. Yet for most people, the true value of life was clear: to eat, to drink, and to survive. The winter was luxury enough. Wealth wasn't found in gold or jewels, but in the sharing spirit of the tribe, where everyone knew that without hunting together, gathering together, and protecting one another, no one would survive. Understanding what it meant to be rich in the Stone Age allows us to reflect on the present. Graves like Varna and Sunghir reveal the ancient origins of power, prestige, and inequality, but they also remind us that the core values of existence remain the same: community, land, clean water, and connection. After thousands of years of civilization, humanity still chases symbols of wealth. Yet, the most precious thing has never changed: to live, to be safe, and to exist together. Perhaps, in the Stone Age, a millionaire was simply the one who could sleep soundly through a stormy night and wake up to see the next sunrise. Bronze Age. The Bronze Age. And no, we're not talking about LeBron James was a dazzling turning point in the evolution of humankind. After millions of years of carving stone and hunting to survive, humanity finally learned to master metal forging weapons, tools, and, ultimately, power. From this moment on, the first villages rose, the first city-states emerged, and the concept of wealth expanded far beyond mere survival. If, in the Stone Age, being rich meant having food and shelter, then, in the Bronze Age, wealth meant land, slaves, taxes, and gold. The discovery of how to smelt copper and tin reshaped the very structure of society. Civilizations such as Sumer, Babylon, Egypt, Mesopotamia, and the Indus Valley rose to prominence, bringing with them monumental inventions: the wheel, chariots, writing, and the world's first taxation systems. Leaders were no longer just tribal chiefs. They became kings, living gods who controlled trade, land, and even life itself. Wealth began to concentrate in the hands of a few, immortalized in gold-covered tombs, jeweled treasures, and ceremonial chariots, symbols of societies that both admired and feared the power of wealth. Among the figures most often associated with Bronze Age affluence King Solomon of ancient Israel stands above the rest. According to the Book of Kings, Solomon received 666 talents of gold per year, roughly 23 metric tons of precious metal, an amount that would make even today's billionaires pause in awe. In an age before coinage, gold was currency, and Solomon controlled not only material riches, but also the trade routes linking Asia, Africa, and Europe. He taxed merchants, mined resources, expanded agriculture, and built palaces and temples, most famously, the Temple of Jerusalem. Some modern economists estimate that, if adjusted to today's gold prices, Solomon's wealth could have been worth trillions of US dollars, a symbolic but staggering figure, earning him the title of humanity's first legendary billionaire. Yet Solomon wasn't the only one to embody Bronze Age opulence. In Egypt, the tomb of Tutankhamun, hidden in the Valley of the Kings, contained thousands of treasures: a solid gold funerary mask, a golden throne, chariots, and jewels, a testament to the splendor of pharaonic rule. In Iran, Tomb 12 at Tepe Chalo held a young woman buried with more than 30 luxury items, jewelry, gemstones, and engraved seals, evidence of the growing social stratification across Mesopotamia. Viewed through the lens of history, the Bronze Age marked the birth of wealth, as we understand it today. Gold, power, and religion, intertwined rulers possessed not just material riches, but divine authority. Inequality took form. The rich sat upon thrones, while the poor plowed fields and forged bronze for them. And from this age onward, the human desire to accumulate wealth and power became a permanent part of our nature. Though stories of Solomon and the pharaohs were written centuries later and tinged with legend, their symbolism endures. The Bronze Age wasn't just an age of metal, it was an age of ambition, dominance, and inequality. It reminds us that while technology may evolve, the human craving for wealth, power, and immortality remains unchanged. From the first bronze blade to Solomon's golden hoard, history has shown that once humanity learned to master metal, we also began to be mastered by our own greed. Iron Age. The Iron Age was not a complete revolution, but rather the next great leap in human civilization after the collapse of the Bronze Age world. Spanning roughly from 1200 BCE to 600 BCE, it marked humanity's recovery from centuries of turmoil. People had learned to smelt iron at extremely high temperatures, forging weapons and tools far stronger than bronze, ushering in a new era of warfare, trade, and power. And with it, the concept of wealth evolved once again, now intertwined with gold, silver, currency, and economic dominance. Amid this transformation rose a man whose name would echo through history, immortalized in a single phrase: rich as Croesus. Croesus, 595–546 BCE, the last king of Lydia in Asia Minor, modern-day Turkey, is often considered the first true billionaire monarch in history. Though he ruled for only 14 years, his legend has endured for millennia. His kingdom was blessed by nature. The Pactolus River ran through lands rich in electrum, a natural alloy of gold and silver. When he ascended the throne, Croesus inherited a vast treasury from his predecessors and expanded it through taxation and trade, drawing wealth from across the Mediterranean world. What made Croesus truly historic wasn't merely his fortune, but the way he changed humanity's understanding of money. Before him, trade relied on crude lumps of electrum, each with inconsistent purity. Croesus introduced the first standardized gold and silver coins, known as croceids, with guaranteed purity and weight. This was a turning point in financial history, laying the foundation for currency, international trade, and economic systems. Under his rule, Lydia became one of the most prosperous commercial hubs of the ancient world, and Croesus became a symbol of wealth, power, and sophistication. But great wealth often breeds great arrogance. According to the historian Herodotus, Croesus once asked the Athenian sage Solon, "Who is the happiest man alive?" Solon replied, "No one can be called happy until he dies in peace," a warning that human fortune is more fragile than gold. Croesus ignored him. Confident in his power, He declared war on Cyrus the Great of Persia. Before doing so, he consulted the oracle of Delphi and received a prophecy: if you go to war, you will destroy a great empire. Croesus believed it meant victory, but the empire destroyed was his own. In 546 BCE, the Persians captured Sardis, Lydia's capital. Croesus lost his throne, his kingdom, and everything he had built. Some accounts say he was executed. Others claim Cyrus spared him and kept him as an advisor. Either way, Croesus's story became a timeless allegory of fate's reversal, how the richest man on earth could, in a single moment, become the poorest, yet his legacy endured. The gold and silver coinage system he pioneered was adopted by the Persians, spread to Greece, Rome, and beyond, and laid the groundwork for the global monetary economy. Even today, the phrase "rich as Croesus" remains a cultural idiom, symbolizing unmatched wealth. Historians regard him not just as a rich king, but as the first man to understand wealth as power and money as influence. But perhaps the deepest lesson lies in Solon's warning: no one is truly rich until they know what makes them happy. Croesus had gold, power, and an empire, but lacked the wisdom to preserve them. The Iron Age, therefore, was not only the age of iron and innovation, but also a reminder etched into human history that wealth cannot buy destiny, and power cannot endure without humility and clarity of mind. Classical Age. The Classical Era was the period when history truly came alive. Stories of power, war, philosophy, and wealth were no longer shrouded in myth. They were written, debated, and passed down through generations. In Greece, this was the age of Athens, Sparta, and Macedonia, where art, science, and thought flourished. In Rome, meanwhile, an empire was rising with ambitions to dominate the entire Mediterranean world. And among the towering names of this era, two men stand out as enduring symbols of wealth and absolute power: Marcus Licinius Crassus and Augustus Caesar. If Julius Caesar embodied political power, then Crassus represented money itself. Born into a wealthy Roman patrician family, Crassus quickly learned that true power wasn't found on the battlefield, but in real estate. When civil wars left much of Rome in ruins, he seized the opportunity to buy confiscated and burned properties at rock-bottom prices. He even created his own private fire brigade, not out of charity, but profit. When someone's house was on fire, Crassus would negotiate the price before ordering his men to extinguish it. Through this ruthless system, he gradually acquired large parts of the city, turning ashes into gold. According to ancient sources, Pliny estimated his wealth at 200 million sesterces, while Plutarch claimed he possessed 7,100 talents of silver, about 229 metric tons of precious metal, a fortune that would rival today's billionaires. Yet, money was never enough for Crassus. He crushed Spartacus's slave revolt, then joined Julius Caesar and Pompey to form the first triumvirate, Rome's most powerful political alliance. But Crassus wanted more, not wealth this time, but glory. In his disastrous campaign against the Parthian Empire, he was defeated at Carrhae, captured, and according to legend executed by having molten gold poured into his mouth. It was history's cruelest irony: the richest man in Rome, literally consumed by his own greed. If Crassus was the man who amassed fortune, then Augustus Caesar, the adopted heir of Julius Caesar, was the man who owned the world. After his adoptive father's assassination, Augustus inherited not only Caesar's name and power, but also what some historians call the greatest inheritance in human history, the Roman Empire itself. With unmatched political genius, he consolidated control, ended decades of civil war, and became Rome's first emperor. As ruler of the empire, every tax, territory, and treasure ultimately flowed into his hands. Historians estimate that, if measured by modern standards, Augustus's personal fortune would have equaled $4 trillion USD, a number symbolic yet fitting for a man whose power had no equal. But Augustus's true brilliance lay not just in his wealth, but in how he used it. He transformed imperial riches into a structured economic system, expanded Rome across Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East, and established vast trade networks that brought the empire into its golden peace, the Pax Romana. Like Crassus, Augustus understood money's power, but, unlike Crassus, he mastered it rather than being mastered by it. Whether you admire Crassus, the man who turned ashes into silver, or Augustus, the man who turned an empire into wealth, both embody an eternal truth. Wealth and power always walk hand in hand, and both carry the seeds of tragedy. Crassus perished, chasing glory beyond his reach. Augustus was deified after death, worshipped as a god. Their stories mirror the timeless nature of humanity itself, our endless hunger to expand, possess, and conquer, whether through gold or dominion. The classical era, therefore, was not only defined by philosophy and art, but by a new understanding that wealth is a tool, not an end. And even 2,000 years later, its lesson still resonates. Money can buy power, but never wisdom.